1 month since Donald Trump took office, and it's been a frantic one at that. Let me turn to Eleanor Clift, political analyst for the Daily Beast, also current affairs commentator Einar Tangen, who joins us from Boston. Welcome to you both. Eleanor, let me begin with you. Scandals, yes. Controversial decisions that people don't like, yes. But if you ask Donald Trump, he says there's also been progress, and he named a bunch of them during that news conference on Thursday. He said we've withdrawn from the job-killing disaster known as the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We've imposed a hiring freeze on non-essential federal workers. We've issued a game-changing new rule that says for each one new regulation, 2 old regulations must be eliminated. He also has named a new Supreme Court justice, just to name a few. Are we being unfair by just focusing on the controversies and the bad decisions that have been made?
Well, he had a Supreme Court position to fill, so I don't know that that's a particularly huge contribution to name somebody. And the other things you've referenced, a lot of it is resolutions he signs, it's orders that he puts out that haven't actually been implemented. I think he has created a lot of controversy in his first month, but we haven't yet seen any progress on his legislative goals, and that includes finding a replacement for Obamacare, a tax reform proposal, a $1 trillion infrastructure plan that he has talked about, and there's immigration reform, yes. We're expecting this week another format of the travel ban that was poorly executed the first time around. So by previous standards, he hasn't really hit his marks yet, but he has given an indication of what he wants to do, and he's meeting a lot of opposition from the media, from Democrats, and from his own party. To pay for some of his initiatives, he has proposed a border adjustment tax. You've already got 4 Republicans who say they're not going to support that. So he's used to being a CEO and issuing orders that then get carried out. He's now getting welcomed into a government that has checks and balances, that has 2 other co-equal branches, and his insistence that everything is fine and that anything that's critical is fake news plays well among the people who support him, but he's going to continue to get a lot of pushback from certainly the rest of us in the media.
I want to get to you on that whole media, his sort of fascination with the media in just a minute, but let me turn to Einar Tangen. Einar, I want to talk about his foreign policy. Some inconsistent statements in the beginning as a candidate and initially when he took office about China. What is it that China wants to hear from President Trump? And has President Trump perhaps toned down the rhetoric just a bit when it comes to Beijing?
Well, he has. I mean, there's been a lot of advice given to him that this is not a simplistic thing where you ride in and declare that there's new law. I mean, basically, Donald Trump doesn't like anything that the U.S. is in that is multilateral. So that goes to NATO, it goes to Trans-Pacific Partnership, it goes to NAFTA. All of these things, so all trade and security arrangements are not to his liking. His idea of the world is kind of like a bicycle wheel, where you have in the center a hub where the United States sits, and then each spoke is a bilateral investment and perhaps security arrangement that goes out to each country. This allows the United States to use its size to its advantage. What's unusual about this, and a departure from the past, is that he's putting in security assurances as part of this deal, using that. And you saw that earlier with China. He accepted the call from Tsai Ing-wen because he thought that this would be a negotiating chip. China's reaction was less than pleased, and he had to kind of cycle back on that. But at the same time, he met with Shinzo Abe, and he made it very clear that he's going to start drawing sharp lines with Freedom of Navigation Acts and also with this idea of protecting these islands that are in dispute.
Eleanor, let's get back to the whole, his attacks on the media. It's really been consistent, you know, since he took office. He even called the media the enemy of the American people. Fellow Republicans like Senator John McCain criticized the comments, saying that's how dictators get started. Doesn't he have more important things to do than than constantly bashing the media? What is this about?
Well, he operates on emotion, and he does what feels good at that particular moment, and he hasn't given up his Twitter account, and so he vents in these 140-character tweets. But this is more than just reflexive action on his part. Going after the media is a part of the conservative playbook. You can go back to Richard Nixon, who famously had a vice president, Mr. Agnew, who called the press the nadering nabobs of negativism. And so you create this feeling among his supporters that the press is against them and they're this beleaguered minority. It worked better, I think, under Richard Nixon because you really did have a mainstream press. You didn't have all the conservative infrastructure that we see today.
And there was no Twitter.
That's right, exactly. But it's also being done to discredit the mainstream media as all of these stories are percolating along. And does he have front corporations that really are getting money out of Russia? That's one of the latest stories to sort of pop up. If he can convince enough of the American people that the mainstream press is hounding him and they're really inflating this or making it up, that's a winning strategy for him.
Einar, Eleanor mentioned Russia. Let me ask you about U.S. relations with Moscow. Can these two countries have a constructive, productive relationship based on trust when there's such a huge dark cloud hanging over these countries?
Well, it's difficult to see. It was difficult to see from the very beginning how he could kind of pivot towards Russia and use that as things. I mean, from the Chinese perspective, he seems to be trying to figure out what the new enemy is, and that enemy would, of course, be China. And part of that is not because he wants a war. I don't think anyone believes that, but there is this sense that he wants to create an urgency. And if you have an enemy or somebody that you consider against your interest, you can use that because he's in a difficult situation. He has the support of his core support of his 46%, but he has to get things moving. And that means this $1 trillion in infrastructure that Eleanor talked about, also $1 trillion to the defense side. But at the same time as he's cutting taxes, this has created another $8 or $9 trillion in just a few years if this in fact goes through. So in order to get this kind of deficit funding, it looks like he's trying to use China as the reason that the U.S. has to go this direction.
We'll have to leave it there. So much to talk about, but we've run out of time. Eleanor Clift, a pleasure as always.
Thank you.
Einar Tangen, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.